Yeah, it it's weird because I really want neurodivergent to mean what it means.
Mm-hmm.
We need a big tent.
We need a
Mm-hmm.
big tent, and that tent needs to be more than autism and ADHD,
Amen to
and
that, for real.
and we can't throw our neurokin under the bus because they have messy looking presentations.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be this cutesy little superpower. It's whatever you come with. It's what you were born with, it's what you acquire, it's what it's who you are, and it's not always pretty. And it's like, so this I think that people with good intention and trying to flip the stigma and the negativity about disability have come up with this toxic positivity that isn't representative of most people's reality either.
Welcome to Herding Cats and other stories from the genesis of the neurodiversity movement.
Let's herd some cats together with hosts Kassiane, Morénike, Renae, and Oswin.
But because it's on this completely different platform in this completely different medium, there's this whole history that nobody knows about. And I'm like, but that was life, and that was life. And I don't think that anyone is rejecting it at all. I think that if people had more knowledge about all of the things that we have, and like a lot of it's still online. It's not like all of it's lost. A lot of it is lost, but a lot of it is also not. And so it just seems important to me that the next generations know where everything comes from.
Yes, and that's something I'm bothered by, because it's like I'm not blaming anyone for what they don't know, because like there's stuff I didn't know that I had to come into, but like for me, like that's how erasure happens. Like when I think about like music, like like Kendrick Lamar dropped his album the other day. Like Kendrick has always been reaching back to like older music, like concepts from the past, and like so putting a new spin on stuff, but also bringing in the old. Like the whole Squabble Up video was like an 80s 90s like Southern California, you know what I mean, like like love letter, like you know what I mean, like so it's like we got the stuff from Menace to Society in there. We got Darlene Ortiz, with we got the the Baby Boys reference. So many different things in there. The Panther table, like the soul food little thing where you would put the the scramble of the letters.
I think that if you list everything in a Kendrick Lamar project, you're going to be going for hours,
right? and so all those hidden tidbits, like you know what I mean, like I feel like there's so many of those gems in our community too, and I feel like the onus has to be upon us as a community to do the work to find it. Like a lot of people, and sorry, I know you're trying to, I don't, please don't let me talk, but
I'm just keeping a hold of the thought. I'm just keeping a hold of it.
Yeah, hold it. I was just going to say really quickly, like, not to get into the whole Drake Kendrick thing, but what, I'm not going to go there. I'm not, but the reason I want to say that is though, however people felt about whoever whatever artist that they liked, what can't be denied is that for year after year after year after year after year, Drake came out with a huge quantity of music. He came out with albums. He did not start coming out with music. He put out a lot of music. He explored a lot of genres. So whereas Drake was more like Sade or like Prince or Streisand. I'll put something out. I mean, not Drake. I'm sorry, Kendrick. I'll put something out when I want to. I'll sit on an album for 5 years if I want to. I won't. I'll do this. Maybe I'll have a prolific body of work or several things come out at once, and then you won't hear from me for a couple of years and whatever. And so I think that this allowed people to say, okay, I used to love the beat. I used to love to dance, wave my hands, shake my behind to this. But this music here makes me think. You know what I mean? This music here has makes me, it's enjoyable, but it also has a deeper meaning. It's like the difference between fast food and a well-cooked meal. You know what I mean? And that's what I feel like with our community. Without realizing it, there's a lot of fast food consumption. And we need to incorporate something that's more, filling.
I think you said erasure, and it triggered a different line of thinking, obviously. And I had a conversation last week with, I'm not going to name him because I know he's going to listen and he will know the conversation. But he was saying or I was saying something about the fact that it's weird that people think of the neurodiversity movement as a white movement when I know so many people from back in the day who were not. And why is the perception of that? And this person's like, I didn't even know that there weren't, or that it wasn't only white people in the beginning. Like, I'm like, okay, if we're talking like,
Wow.
Because we've all been erased.
we've all been erased. Like, that's what's happened.
It's facts. Like I'm
I
oh, sorry, go ahead.
somebody wrote an article in which they grossly misattributed my work to Judy Singer and like okay, so I don't use this word for all of these reasons having to do with white and academic. And it's like, okay, so hi.
You were in high
You're
school.
gonna need to rewrite your article and redo your reasoning. Like, so your reasons would be valid if your starting premise was not entirely inaccurate. So hi, I'm Kassiane Asasumasu. I am not a white academic. So would you like to start over, please? It was a thing that happened.
For people's reference that are listening and don't know, Kassiane is the person that coined the word neurodivergent.
I sure
In
am.
high
And
school.
I am not a white academic. In high school, and even if I was a white academic, in high school, you're not an academic. You're a high schooler. These are different things.
Like,
But that's how it is. People steal. Like and whether it's intentional or not, people steal. Like when I see stuff, concepts that people come up with, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that has been around forever. Like whatever, like when people try to it's like this. I think about I was working on a paper about participatory research, and people were talking about how the origins in the global north. I was thinking, you do realize the term participatory research was coined at a conference in Tanzania, right? I'm like, you do realize that the International Participatory Research Network came from Africa, and then the very next, the largest chapter of it, global chapter, was in Asia. Like, I'm like, this is not a global north thing. This came from people wanting, like building up from the work of, like the pedagogy of the oppressed and, like the adult education movement and like the, post-colonialism and all this kind of stuff. And people were taking these things and, seizing it from the ivory tower. And it was like this activism that was fueling education, fueling research, fueling practice. And just like with one swoop, now it's become this thing that people do to check off a box to get like a grant. Like it's weird.
Honestly, I started thinking about it in terms of the word neurodivergent, how I don't think that a white person would have come up with the term because a white person doesn't see the need for the big tent.
Mm-hmm.
That is so deep.
I think you're right, though. They don't, because
it's so individualistic.
Always seen as the default. They only need their one, more often than not, they only need their one different slot.
Yeah.
For those who are not aware of the different slot, this it kind of goes along with the concept of intersectionality, or if you've ever gone to the easiest way to explain it in chronic illness communities is you get one way to be different, right? You can have one illness, or you get to be, that's how I've had to explain it the most, is it the doctor? Well, you already have this, like, yes, and I also have this. Or, well, you're already, assigned female at birth. Yes, and I'm also happy. You're already, you're already clear. Yes, and I also, am disabled. You get one way to be different. And white people, they're not a person of color. They have their different slot open.
So disability can fill it all. You know what I mean? Or queerness can fill it all, or whatever can fill it all. And ours, we've already used up all of our spots from birth, most of us.
Yeah, our attunement slots are full to use D&D language.
Looking at the paperwork earlier for the LOI that we're going to submit, and it says, does the executive director, and it lists all these things, and I think like one of them I don't qualify, or I can't check off. I think
Yeah,
I can't check off that I was a veteran.
yeah, that's the only one. Yeah.
It's like, no, I need more than one slot, please.
And it's interesting, their old form used to say your leadership team. So if it was that, then we would have checked that off because of so like, but yeah, like it's, all of these things, like these over, lapping identities. It's like, it's reality, and so I'm glad, even though sometimes it gets frustrating because it feels like some of the language has been co-opted. I don't know that I get frustrated, but I also feel like I'd almost rather confused or weird or bad dialogue about it than no dialogue about about all of these things, all of these moving pieces.
Yeah, it's weird because I really want neurodivergent to mean what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We need a big tent.
We need a big tent, and that tent needs to be more than autism and ADHD.
And that for real.
And we can't throw our neurokin under the bus because they have messy looking presentations.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be this cutesy little superpower. It's whatever you come with. It's what you were born with. It's what you acquired. It's it's who you are. And it's not always pretty, and it's like, so this, I think that people in with good intention and trying to flip the stigma and the negativity about disability have come up with this toxic positivity that isn't representative of most people's reality either.
And the thing is, all the categories that people want to narrow it down to so they can kick those people out of their tent, there's already words for those categories.
Yeah.
We have a word for developmental, for developmental disabilities you're born with. It's called developmental disability.
Yep.
We have a word for autism and ADHD. Autism. ADHD, or again, we're talking neurodevelopmental disability.
Yeah.
Can I say, I need to add on with this because it's an add-on. Can we stop saying autistic neurotypes, and can we stop saying ADHD neurotypes? Because that's just replacing disorder or condition with neurotype, and that's not what a neurotype is.
I think people are confused, I really do, you know what I mean? Like, but I hear you. I think it's just, like people are just trying to learn a little something and they're passing that information to it. It's kind of like the game telephone, like you whisper something and by the time it gets to the end, it's been distorted. You know what I mean? Like, it's confusing to me. Like, and I have to explain to people that, what do you mean? No, intellectual disability is part of neurodiversity too. Why would it not be? Like, like it's, like, like some of the pioneers of our movement were, were openly, what I mean, living with ID. And so it's like, to me, for people to think that doesn't, or if that, our co-occurring psychiatric disabilities, shouldn't be mentioned or aren't part of it or whatever, it just seems like it's really a major confusion. I'm thinking, you realize that things can be multiple things at once and still be true. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I have such a hard time with, I think the reason I have a hard time with it is because as it gets distilled down to things that we already have, what I keep on seeing in like all the practice spaces is how that then becomes co-opted, and then even things like neuroaffirming can mean practically anything as long as you agree that this person is neurodivergent.
For real. Like,
and you're willing to say, oh, I see your strengths. I'm like, okay, did you not see them before? I know the answer is yes, they didn't, or no, they didn't see them before, but that's besides the point.
Well, I got it, Oswin. I'm going to open a trauma-informed, culturally affirming prison. There we go.
There you go. Okay. So knowing how to better cause trauma is not the same as trauma.
Goodness.
Words mean things.
Words mean things, and we've been saying this for over a decade.
But the idea though, like it's so like when I can go somewhere and like do a speaking engagement. Recently I did one, and there was a high school student there, and and so she was mentioning her being neurodivergent, and I was like, look at this baby, like it just made me so happy. I was like, look, you know what I mean, like that used to be rare, like those of you who were like really young, Lee, like a few people who were like young, were rare. Everybody was kind of finding themselves a little older, but now it's like this understanding is filtering down, to our youth, to where they, they're getting it. They're rejecting these social norms of, that you have to try to mask, that you have to try to, make yourself into the best version of an autistic person that you can be, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, it's encouraging.
I was actually talking to Olivia about something along these lines, because like, not autistic, but so like notices that the kids around her treat her different when she's in new places. And I finally asked him, like, do you know why they treat you different? Or do you notice they treat you different? And she says, yes. And do you know why? No. It's like, because your body moves different than theirs. And they don't know what to expect. Because we've never tried to make her look like she doesn't have her disability.
Yeah. So that people aren't accustomed to that, because people are taught from again to try to make the person quote unquote indistinguishable from the norm. And now that's moving away from that, we're getting something that we've never had before. It's like people who have spent their entire lives, kind of like openly, being, disabled, like, and not, I guess being forced to, to pass.
Right.
To try to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's wonderful. It's also a privilege that that many, many kids will not have for the next
some
few
people cannot
decades.
pass. Yeah.
Oh no, like being
to be able to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's too many people that can't, and can't even mask. Like I'm pretty sure Olivia could mask if we like coached her on it.
But the amount of effort and energy,
right? It's not worth it.
Yeah, the emotional turmoil too. Like,
she'd be exhausted.
I mean, she's already exhausted.
Yep.
So, yes, even more so. But like, she's lucky because she's a cute little girl.
She is a cutie.
And so she gets to have a pass that a lot of kids won't have.
Can we talk about that too, in our community, how so many of us look so freaking young? Like it's some kind of weird thing about like neurodivergence. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
isn't it the EDS?
A lot of it, yes. And then there's the basement dwelling, and I also saw the lack of facial expression as a hypothesis. So you don't get the smile lines because that requires that you smile.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Interesting. I will say though, I kind of get upset and a little hurt when people start talking about how white people's complexion and everything is like different because of like skin damage and all the different things. And like, y'all are kind of casting a wide net, because the remark is, it's not my fault that white ages faster than the other.
Oh, some people will say that. Oh, well, like in terms of, yeah. But see, even like, but that's the thing though. Like our white neurodivergent siblings don't look like our like the,
yeah,
like
that's
true. Are, you know what I mean? They don't age the same. I mean, maybe like the hair loss or whatever, but I mean like the skin, the smiles, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I guess it depends.
They do age slower.
Yeah.
I
think it also has to do with where you. I feel like it's interesting. I feel like autism is like, maybe neurodivergence overall is like accelerated aging and then like delayed aging. Like so, in some ways, like your body is like that of a senior citizen, right? And then some ways you're like very youthful, like whether it's in your thinking or whatever.
It's the EDS.
That's all the EDS.
It's the EDS and the CPTSD.
Did I tell y'all that I finally have something that shows I have genetic markers for EDS? Finally?
What?
Really?
Yes. I mean, it took forever, but I have type 7, I think, is the dermatology one, which makes so much sense.
Mm.
Oh, okay. What's funny is I don't have the genetic testing that says I did because I was diagnosed clinically before the genetic testing was
Without.
widely known.
Okay. Yeah.
I've just
But,
been keeping
like-
my DNA results in a bunch of places that will tell you things.
Yeah. That's smart.
And they finally told me. Yay. But that means I need to tell my doctors. And disqualify myself for surgery for the rest of my life.
Not
Yeah, that is why I have not
gone in for the testing. Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
the genetic testing because we know I have
Yeah.
it. We also know I have mutant healing factors, so it works out
Mm-hmm.
just fine. It like evens out.
Oh.
I don't think I told y'all. I think I told Oswin that maybe I did. My memory doesn't. But because I know I didn't tell you this yet. I don't think that we found some papers that apparently I was diagnosed with APDD when I was 7. So like, yeah, the predecessor to PDD and NOS. And my parents, being immigrants, they didn't know what the freak that was, and nobody explained it to them. You know what I mean? So they weren't worried about it. Like, so
you've been diagnosed since you were little.
and I'm thinking I got diagnosed after my kids, and I'm wondering how many other people, because Sharon from AWN has a similar story, how the doctor refused to put it because they thought it was going to cause problems, you know what I mean, and like wrote something else on the paper, you know what I mean, like, or whatever, or like, so like I wonder how many of us, because Donald Triplett or whatever, like, wasn't his initial diagnosis before he got autistic disorder? Didn't they diagnose him with something else, like infantile schizophrenia or something like that? I'm trying to remember.
Probably
Like
because that was the diagnosis of the time.
Yeah.
I wonder, because I know I had speech services before I entered kindergarten. I know I did. My mom has told me, and she's always said they told us that your tongue was too big for your mouth and you were having a hard time moving it around. I'm now like, that sounds like apraxia.
Yeah.
But that is as close as I know I have of anything from diagnosis back then, which is not unsurprising since I didn't go to the doctor till I was like 18. So how would anybody catch anything, especially in a small town?
Speaking of doctors, have you all ever heard of a full sensory friendly practice? Like, not just a provider.
Yeah.
I haven't either. Like, that would be something I would love if somebody I don't know if they got some kind of funding or support to create something like that, because it's like you'll find like, okay, this is a sensory friendly provider who does this, right? Or this dentist does this, or this person does this. So you have to try to get that one person. But if they're sick or if they're on vacation or whatever, the rest of the practice isn't set up that way. Like, it would be so nice to have something that, like whoever you see, in that, there would be able to accommodate you.
That would be lovely, but I haven't.
That would be. They'd have to like autistic people enough.
Yeah.
And it has to be an area with enough autistic people around that can afford their services.
That's the part that isn't going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Because that second part, that will get me on a whole rant, so we should move on.
Mm-hmm.
Have we triggered all the memories?
Funny.
Thanks for listening to Herding Cats. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. It really helps us grow our community with your help.